Alright, now just devoche yanja, some losarbiki, and Lobsang Starbuck, social Lucia Rabatilaya, and Bemasi, and Chasan, Sem Gayut on Chasan Yan, Geshe Thubten.
Tonight's our first weekend class of the new year, and I just want to say how delighted I am to be back amongst old friends, some new faces, but also those that I've known, I have a Dharma connection with now for many years. So I'm really delighted to see you all again.
And I'm and the YouTube don't say don't tablam ding on Zuki, that was Jang Shigore. Di Chandler Shading and the YouTube get tabum so the Chiungo Bota, Nang Simginane, so Nang Simlatine, Digi, Deo Tuko Chida, don't say it's our Nang Simiris. The names are Nangalia, Nang Simutone, Gandis Samataje, and the chick Semia get down Gure, and the Gandis Samtaje on the same, and the chick. Maui Rikti Ma Meva Soyata, Sem Sangburgi Yango, Compita Yagi Diagdala, Semgi Chang Torki, Lopsandida, and Zuge Denia and to Suere.
All of us here, myself and all of you, in fact, all beings everywhere, we yearn to live a life of stable happiness, a life where we experience no problems or difficulties. Even the slight problems we experience, we want to repel, we want to be freed of. So this is something we all have in common. And this is what motivates each and every action we engage in. And that's why we've all gathered here tonight, to achieve happiness and be freed of suffering. Because we've come to recognize that in terms of the two sources of happiness, that from the outer material world and that from the development of our own inner world, a way of thinking, it's a way of thinking that is primary in terms of eliminating suffering and experiencing lasting happiness. So the happiness we yearn for, a happiness that is freed from suffering, comes about primarily independent on our way of thinking. So therefore, the purpose of this and every class that we have is to gather knowledge about what kinds of minds to develop to bring happiness and how to develop them, and what kinds of minds cause us problems and pain and how to eradicate them. So this is the purpose of this class and every other class, learning about ourselves, coming to know ourselves better.
디기주베다 동화세기 데니게 장도르게 롭전 제바텔라양 튼게 망고 좀 고거와 나서 뒤시지 아버지 고거래 뒤세라고 거래 뒤세매나 안데네 자요 고갑라게 말에 근데 뒤세 여바이나 양치 수부 탕보러 자 고거래 수부 탕보면에 니 견지는 가서 자야 고갑라가 티고래 나지 수부 탕보다 뒤세 여바이나 양 데니기 시행지 고거래 시행매나 양 데니세 장고다 디야메가 강아티고래 진짜 시행 여바이나 양 장사 사지 고거와 안 데니기 고거 진짜 튕기 망고지 좀 고거래 진짜 가서 디링 차상을야 튕기 야보 치 토냐가서 속사이네 튕기 여대봐 아니 시 대진의 최시 제한이네 여대봐래 안 뒤져이네 소소라나 뒤져 콤바 류기되네 탐보여봐 아는 가서 셈이 토네나 셈이 토네 되네기 장도 제약이 듬보여봐 튕기 차상 좀 되봐래 진짜 되네게 좀야데 빼마시 깔렉하고 쉬우래와 당아 som다는 뒤져 되네 좀야데 깔렉하고래 되네기 되네 가서 뒤리 뒤져 되네 약보식 좀바 빼마세 자 침보지나 약보치 인산병하들야 가오고미야 차고래
The purpose of receiving these teachings is to get to know ourselves better, to learn what are the minds that need to be developed and how to do so, and which are those that harm us and should be abandoned. So in other words, we need to engage in receiving teachings and then training our minds, strengthening our good qualities and turning away from harmful habitual patterns. So these we need to identify and learn the techniques to transform ourselves. For this to come about, a large number of causes need to come together. And if any of these crucial causes are missing, even if the others are gathered, one will be unable to learn what is required and transform one's mind. Firstly, one needs to have an interest. One needs to have an interest in developing our inner world, our ways of thinking. Secondly, one needs time to come to teachings, time to reflect on the information received. Thirdly, one also needs good health. If one's health is particularly poor, this so it makes it very difficult to have the time and the mental space to be able to absorb teachings and reflect on them. Fourthly, one also needs a guide, a teacher, someone who can present this information and make it relevant to oneself. And then fifthly, one also needs a place to gather. If all of these conditions are there, such as an interest, having time, health, and there's a teacher, but there isn't a place to gather, one will be unable to receive these teachings. So there are many conditions, favorable conditions that are required, and all of them need to be gathered in order to be able to learn how to transform our mind and then to be able to do so. So this is a good point to reflect on again and again, because it serves to highlight to us just how fortunate we are, make evident to us our own good fortune, which we may well take for granted. And becoming aware of our good fortune then, rejoice in this, appreciate what the causes that we have all accumulated, and now the results that we are experiencing.
Sem Lamrim tono gyuwa taan che nga zuke tiki zhugya, tenki teki zhugya taan ane chike tenki dunga se tuwa di salma taane tukiyo ba di kar sung bari sangyu jumlen chi sung bari wa sangyu jumlen yo korongi dinige nyamlen che kawa che nyamlen che tu zine nyamnyong to ne dumze dine tuyan du dine tungu du sine korongi nyamnyong dine ngale nyamnyong dine dine juso ngale dine juso sine ngi kyun chasang meba suya chaba yunde chasang ngi top chaba yin chasang da ngale dine jungu du wu se ta korongi nyamnyong to ne dama korongi dangbo nyamlen ka rinpa ka dangbo ka che nipa ka sumpa ka che tang rinpa pa sangji ye sung she barwa da sangji sung bari an di je so da dine ane ki kerup mangbo 안 지당 안 주기 야할만 공부를 좀 라서 봐도 파배 통화라서 봐도 이렇게 지게 한번 좀 망보이게 상이 손셔봐 될래야 제수 자지 냠는 제도 혹시는 어디는 이 상이 손바나 다가랑 rum제 통구도 써야지 마순 거로 와 안디 나신 제네다 디 제수한테 보이게 개베리 개바 망보 나네 내 망보여 되네 사다한테 제를 뭐 제네 되게 냠는 다가랑도 손바데 다가랑 아주 두수 제고도 제나 제가 통구도 써야 돼. 다 제르면 제가 송거로 봐. 다 되네게 송바데 이제 아주 빼지 지야마도 미워서 투마냐로 봐. 당하죠. 당하죠. 무엇을 투야 돼. 제야 돼. 봐도 대상 겨울음 제래. 지상 겨울음 지게 가서서는 되네게 냠는 제반을 dum제 퇴야 두 지상아 되네게 로망괴링을야 니 잠니 이제 장주심 냠는 제반인 제진당아 말야 되네되네 리기도 우세 똑바 냠는 되네 중국도 세는 겨울음 지게 송거로 봐. 제가 차상 코너도 냠는 차상기 용구도 우세서 송거래 용에 타셔 봐 봐다 미치기 나한테 주제인데 나를 dum제 퇴마서 라칸스 좀 매러 봐다 봐. 나 냠는 두 제벤제 나를 dum제 딜려 마서 셀라 매러 봐다. 약간 쓰죠 말아. 내 냠는 제주 제베 인데 마 둥알 빵 마서 또베 연된 게 마서 라칸 요 말아. 제상 차상에 냠내 약고 제가 차상기 dum제 되는데 용구도 또베 연된 되네 기도 녀모 빵 투구도 세데 네 대순 걸 봐서 되네 수고 봐서 나 주기 될야. 다 이시 장마 제초해 주지다. 다 제자 되네 나 주기 되는 마 손시기 될야. 다가라 이시 장마 제제 또 숨바 나신제 나 주기 강 톱두기 소수기 냠는 제데 어두 신의 제데 계치 마셔거로 봐.
Identifying the causes of our pain and misery, as well as the causes of attaining lasting happiness, and how to eradicate the causes that otherwise lead to pain and misery, and how to cultivate the minds that lead to lasting happiness. This method was taught by Buddha Shakyamuni. Buddha Shakyamuni, independent on his own experience of having become a perfected being, becoming a Buddha, was able then to teach the complete and unmistaken sequence of trainings that he engaged in order to sequentially progress towards the attainment of Buddhahood, the state of perfection. And because he had attained such a state through his own endeavors, he was able to share this complete and unmistaken method to his students. And then over the centuries that followed, many great masters arose in India, masters such as Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Shantideva, Atisha, and so forth, who also took those same teachings that the Buddha had given many hundreds of years before, put them into practice in their own minds, developed them in their own continuums, and came to see the validity of that training, that they were able to eliminate all inner faults and develop perfectly all good qualities. And they've composed many texts summarizing or clarifying how one can go about doing this. Then those teachings were transmitted through to the snowlands of Tibet, where there are many great masters such as Geshe Lama Tsongkhapa, who also put into place perfectly, or into practice perfectly, those teachings and attained the full result, and also composed texts explaining clearly how to do so. Now we only know these great masters through their biographies and autobiographies and through the legacy of their texts, but in our modern world we have the unparalleled example of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And when he teaches, just like these great masters, he also teaches based on his extensive learning and his own lived experience. So we can hold him up as an example of someone who has put into practice over a lifetime of training and attained results. And also we will know people who over many years have also put into these teachings into practice. In fact, there is no one who could say that, yes, I've applied these teachings as they are presented over years of training, and I've seen no benefit. I'm no happier than I was before, or I have as many problems as I had before. No one would be able to say that. So here we come to understand the examples of the historical figures, and we apply that to what we can observe, and this then serves as a motivation for us to strive to put the understanding and implementation of these teachings at the forefront of our endeavors as something of primary importance in our lives.
네 소소지부 되나 기부요래 네 칼라시라 사면에 둘로 교우면에 기부용도 안디 지 코라다 지게 디와 안스지 제조조자다 되게 지르이네 하는 거라서 진짜 셈텔랑라지 용거를 여들어와 그래서 셈레 대화 연나 치 코라다 튕긴기 안설이야 강아지 돼야도 용용차거로와 셈리야 집에 셈레 강아다 셈리야 콩로사 셈마지 버려 줘되वे나 와다 칼라야 오시무사 같이 여배네 기고요 말에 돌아야 보고에 같이 건배네 기고요 말에 안 소소그 조고 타니버 같이 씀다 니버 같이 여배네 기고요 민도와 진짜 니가 셈게 쇠버와 칠로게 칼라게 가지고 기메어서 칼라배야고 칼라 기메어서요 말아 돌아야고 쉬고에 강배야고 니기 기메어서요 말에 소소게 셈게 쇠버와 진짜 소소 니고 조고 소소리야 가본지 망보여 되네 대소가 소소 기분 봐서요만 소소 셈지죠. 제상 소소를 콩로 녀몽온도 규리베 갑라 는 아주 가래 해외네 기우매 봐지. 소소 셈 대라랑 갈라랑 집에 지 현래 펜베 삼로 주 예리 갑라 가래이네 튕긴 야고매네 네 가 지연에 디지 가 마삼베제 가나 대라라 여봐지. 지선 디 여봐딩 저기 두 삼다도 셈기 토네 디기 줍투고요 바다 셈기 토네 강아세 투고요 바디 세부 하고 가서 때 디가서야 냠녀로 쉬여여 버셔와 디네자 디 셈기 토네 장도로 제네 셈 이상보다 약보지까지 뭐 공부다 도배네 가서를 디기 체여하다 근데 주야 인자 디네자 당아서 셈기 토네 장도로 해야지 마송고로와
what one will have experience of, even if one hasn't met great masters like His Holiness, what one will have experience of is one's own life, one's own lived experience and what one has observed. You'll have experience that in times when your mind is very spacious, calm and relaxed, the outer circumstances around one, the material circumstances, won't have much impact on your happiness. In other words, if one's mind is calm and relaxed and spacious, but one is quite poor at that time, one's perhaps impoverished, or one doesn't have particularly tasty food to eat, one is really just getting by financially, but one's mind is happy and spacious, it's not a problem. And even if one is not with friends, but one is alone, one is not lonely. One's mind is happy. But one is perhaps very likely to have the contrary experience, that even if one's material conditions are quite good, especially if we compare on a global scale, we can see generally people's material conditions here are quite good. And one may be surrounded by friends and loved ones who do deeply care for you. But if one's mind is in a bad place, if one is experiencing a deep darkness within and one is unhappy, all the outer abundance that may surround one, all the loved ones and friends that may surround one, cannot overcome the deep unhappiness that one may feel. So from this lived experience, one can see the difference having a kind heart, an open heart makes. Whereas if the mind is dark and unhappy, one cannot appreciate what's around one. So recognizing that, we can see the benefit that will follow for all of us. To the extent that we can develop a kind heart, we will be happier. To the extent we can overcome harmful minds such as anger or self-centered attitude, to the extent we can reduce those, we will also be happier. So recognizing this, we can then see the importance of training our mind, strengthening our wholesome virtuous ways of thinking, and weakening those ways of habitual ways of thinking that harm us.
Dine zadang juge diri ngazu deshi sheba nashi da ngazu tunken na duse pe yago jigra swa dine zada dine duse tele ya chue nyamlen je nyamlen chue jangder che de yang semjen tamje gi döndal ya ane rang jibu ma yin ba dunga se digi jubya semjen tamje gi döndal sanjo go ba tobi chirdo ane nge di jangdo chi gi yesen pe da ngazu gongoro chi dine keje anji je odu shine ge go ba.
So recognizing our great good fortune at having somehow created the causes that have led us to this point, where we have the interest to receive these teachings, we have the time and all the other circumstances required, this is something to recognize and rejoice in. And moreover, recognize that this is part of our training, gathering of knowledge that we then implement to transform our mind, so that we can attain lasting happiness. And add to this motivation that one wants to become happier, whilst one wants to become happier oneself, through becoming happier, through becoming more stable and kind-hearted, we will have a beneficial impact on others. Those who are directly in our orbit, our family and loved ones, but in fact, through them, a greater society. So therefore, set as a motivation to receive this series of teachings in order to develop ourselves so that not only do we benefit directly, but through us, all other beings can benefit as well. And in terms of how much to develop to the point where we also are counted amongst the Buddhas, develop ourselves to the point of perfection so that we can continue to give to others ever greater amounts of happiness and joy, all through our own inner self-development.
Dine zada ngazu diri ma jiksun she di jer me jiksun she begi da lamrim jing se ji ondus di korma shuare.
So tonight we start this new text composed by Rinpoche Lama Tsongkhapa, the middle Lamrim, translated as the middle-length treatise on the stages on the path to enlightenment.
Dine za 제름치게 두송와 대한 제름치 호랑 총사디 왜니 안지 암돌로 바스마 총교래 되는 마중 되는 야 안지 최기 낭최기 롭녀제 조디 의리야 폐지 의리야 롭주 즉 남의 망고 제인데다 최신인 즉시 오지 롭주 제나와.
The author of this text, Lama Tsongkhapa, he was born in the part of Tibet called Amdo in western Tibet, but he's moved to central Tibet at a young age, and he's gained his Dharma education in central Tibet, studying with a great number of remarkable teachers.
농아 용수 조비고 롭종제 당보 기회 신연절이야 퇴장 롭종제 되네 롭종제네 안제라 야 안지게 공공제 냠레제기 쭉 참을 패지 공접제 도시네 냠렌 나로와.
And he first engaged in extensive study, hearing teachings from his spiritual teachers. And when he had gathered a wealth of knowledge, he then had a sufficient basis to engage in intensive meditation. And in this way, was able to radically develop his mind.
니니기다 제르미초 그런게 당보 퇴섬 곰 퇴바데 삼바제선 퇴 당보 라마제네 야파 취슈 데네 돈다데 야네노 삼다 데네 삼다에 제알이 안 곰 잡지 곰 데니게 소수게 냠용을 토네 다 냠랭이 심바 도수신 바 스마 지셔교리 마 송셔교 들어와다 람림데.
The lived example of Lama Tsongkhapa is that of someone who heard an extensive number of teachings from his spiritual teachers, and whilst hearing, he reflected on their meaning, taking all the teachings received as personal instructions directly relevant to him. And on this great foundation, he then engaged in meditation, cultivating all the stages of the path to enlightenment within his own continuum.
데네 자 데네기 아니 제름지게 마 송셰비게 베체디 톤데 롭종제 냠내지간 다 데네 냠내지는 또벌길레기 되겐 다 케베 원보 망보 중요로 와다. 제름지게 람림 데네 수좀로 와다 람림 뎁지사로와 데네 지네 데네 뎁델이야 퇴섬 곰숨 롭종제네 데네 케바 냠낸 또벌길레기 되가 라마 망보 중요로 와지.
Through his extensive hearing, reflecting, and meditation, he radically transformed his mind. And based on his own deep spiritual transformation, which had come about in dependence on extensive study, he composed texts such as this middle Lamrim. And then in dependence on this text, so many other great learned lamas in the centuries that followed also gained transformative realization through their own hearing, reflecting, and meditation, including texts such as this.
데네 자다 데네기 람림델이야 아주게 친연지에 고고프라와드 베마세 가와상보다 야고 슈시레 당아주이네 따지게 냠레 야고 나와인 제바인 아주길래 니게와 바도메 바세야나 또고길래 예마데 직제 시모가 책으로 봐.
The purpose of recounting this is for each of us individually to recognize our own great good fortune. Because we may well take things for granted, because we have no direct recognition of the incredible amount of causes that we individually had created, or the virtue we had created to bring us to this point.
딩위 사제카고나 제바서다 딩세데 제자다 딩세데 람림 중요하라고래 딩이라고래 제자 람림 첨보지 제차 제바라 다디 딜레네 된다 직바 임바일라 아니 베제 직용어 뒤네 샤바서 딩세 데 중요세 다디 오게 람림 뒤된세 뒤뒤셔 딜라테네 고 제바요 바서 람림 딩세데 온두시네 찬데 되는 쇼로와.
So for those who have the book, the title the translator chose was the middle-length treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, which is quite a mouthful, but that's an abbreviation from the Tibetan, which is even a little bit longer. So that is, let's see, So the middling length stages, the middling length stages of the path towards enlightenment that are practiced by the three types of beings, together with its outlines. And it would start with an explanation of the middling stages of the path to enlightenment, for the three of the trainings for the three types of beings, together with its outlines. So there, as it's referenced in the title there, this is the middling length. There is a great and then there is a short. They're all three similar texts composed by Lama Tsongkhapa, but of varying length. We hear in the full title in Tibetan that it's the stages of training for beings of three different capacities. So who are these three beings? So we'll see as we progress through the text, they are the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, they are the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity, and the trainings unique to the practitioner of supreme capacity.
기부 삼로당당 개충화라 거래 기부 충원의 기부 가사 삼로당당 개충화세 거래 디견에서 기부 충원세의 삼로 가능성 것은 탈바세다 내내게 삼마다제 다 개와 치마 안수는 게 뭐가제 아니 개와 치마 하다미고 파지 토구도 선배게 내내게 삼마당 되겐기 가사들라 기부 충원라고 거래 그것가 가서는 그 삼모디 마송래 타르제 개와 치마 하다미고 봐 토구도 삼마도 타바 토구도 산예고 봐 토구도 삼등거 말에 매반자 내내게 삼당한데라 개와 치마 하다미고 바지 토구를 마도 마통 때 가송래 기네다 둥아 강아 망보도 하다미고 봐도나 가송들레 제강아 충아 세상 개와 치마 가송래 타르제 하다미고 봐 토구도 삼백이 내내 삼로 땅도 경기 땅에 다 냠ren지 행 개와 강사들라 기부 충원라고 그래.
What differentiates these three types of beings is the breadth of their mental attitude. So to look at the first, the practitioner of initial capacity, or more commonly called the practitioner of small capacity. So their way of thinking is narrower, smaller, which means the goal with which they engage in spiritual development is of a far smaller scope than other practitioners. They are striving merely or just for a good rebirth in the next life. They have a strong determination that they are going to engage in spiritual development to create the causes to ensure they do not fall into the suffering lower realms, but attain a good rebirth, such as a human, in their next life. This is the goal with which they engage in spiritual development. They have no thought about liberation or enlightenment, but they are focused on achieving a good rebirth and accumulating the causes for a good rebirth.
나 제부 증세디기 다 삼는 딜에 개체했던 거래. 그랬던 거라서네. 코위에 안송을 가서 안주 동안에 타지 하다 미고 봐 토바쯤이 디점기 띵기 대화 토구민도 제가 밀리네 동아 망고도 강아 망고도 할래네 동 강아 망고요래. 제가 강아 차산에 탈기민도 코위 안송을 타지 하다 미고 봐 토네 강아 창마 매워 쇠면 강아 탈기민도 제가 강아도 제가 다 디코위 동아 세데 동안 싸우기네 매버 코위 동아들에 타고도 다 딜레마타네 탑민도 선비게진 타바도 눈에 되건 코위 동아를 되게 타바세데 톱고도 선비게 되니게 삼로 케드게 가사들라 다 기부 증라고 그래서 디질레 대시 기부 중에 삼다나들로 코에 삼로데 개체와 차례 그래서는 코위 동안송의 동아를 타와 점기 디게 장마 차기면도와 할랄기나 동아도 밀레기나 동아도 저 동아 차사며 보고 동아를 타고도 다 산지고 봐 샘전 탐지게 된다 삼단거 말 나랑 코위 동아 타달래 타르제 안 탈비게 탈비고 봐 톱고도 샘배 삼나 당한디 다 기부 증래.
The practitioner then of initial capacity has this narrower, smaller way of thinking, striving just to ensure they don't fall into the suffering lower realms. But the practitioner of intermediate capacity has a far broader scope, far broader outlook. They recognize that whilst they do not want to be born in the lower realms, even a rebirth in the so-called happier migrations as a human or God, these are still pervaded by suffering. They look at their own experience, they come to also understand the experience of other humans as well as gods, and recognize actually wherever one is born within samsara, as long as one remains bound by the causes that keep us stuck in these suffering realms, peace of mind, freedom from pain and misery cannot be attained. So they have a far more profound understanding of the sufferings of samsara, and thereby have given rise to a determination, a definite mind, a mind that is definite about arising from the suffering realms of samsara in their entirety and attaining liberation from suffering, liberation or freedom from suffering, liberation from samsara. This is the goal of the practitioner of intermediate capacity. So the practitioner of initial capacity or small scope is just striving for a good rebirth. But the practitioner of intermediate capacity, they are striving for liberation from samsara in its entirety, for the freedom of nirvana. But they have not developed a sincere determination to work for the welfare of others. They are focused on their own individual liberation from samsara. So for them, there's no thought of attaining Buddhahood. Rather, they are striving for their own individual liberation.
tarbaseade targudu korwe dunga thala targudu sempege kibu jumi samdana samnatida di kala di tela kar samdasa soso rama chibu korwe dunga la tarje tarba topne di digimino shen semjen dige ane kangal hodna ane so konzile dewa debar dunga mitewe chiba ngana chibarawa dine insa ngana chibu sen digimino semjen 탐제 semjen chejung dunroda hada mida dunro kan치 이네 kowe dunga tada de la kowe dunga la tada dunga la zhe ya ani kyun chasang bang ji me ba sui ne an sang yu ko ba to gu du sen be ge sem jian tam ji ge ani kowe dunga la zhe sang yu ko ba to gu du sen be sang ge se de kyun gun xie yuan de gu de dian ba gu gu du nga ra ji gu ma de sem jian tam ji de gu gu du ji san sem jian tam ji ge duan da sem jian tam ji 상계 고봉 고야게 된다는 게 심지어 탐지게 된다려 상계 고봉 토벌 지긴 선비기 삼로 땅을 지어로다 디기부 첨보래 다기부 첨보서 삼로 개첨보 거 딜레 하바 삼로 땅요 마다 심지어 탐지 동아세야다 심지어 탐지 디기 주에게 삼다나 딜레 하바다 잔주 동아세가 셔 말어봐 심지어 탐지 동아세서나 디기어로 심지어 내지 디기 줍선에 디기어로 삼로 딜레 개체와지 매바래 되니 현자 semna nane gyachesho dangor semja tamjege dona sam tawaiza dinige sam dang han nyamne jing asa telada kibu chimbo la gor samla gyachembo dang han kibu la gor da dan sikni gode samla gyachembo dang de gen kibu samlo dile de gyachungwa da meni kowe naso dungale samda de tingdang de kibu samlo dinis dang han ding 다 되네게 소소한 고유행 안선 하다 미고방 디점톱네 디그레스메 삼다 삼로 되네 충충 다 되게니까 해서 기고라고 그래서 최충세데 삼로게 최충의 것이요 시고로.
In the same way, the practitioner of intermediate capacity, their way of thinking, their way of training has come about independent on the first having reflected on the same trainings as the practitioner of initial capacity. The practitioner of greatest capacity, their way of thinking has also come about independent on reflecting on what the practitioner of initial capacity reflected on, and prior to that what the practitioner of initial capacity reflected on. So here, the practitioner of greatest capacity, they have also given rise to the initial determination of not wanting to be born in the suffering lower realms, and have developed this further to not wanting to be reborn in the suffering realms of samsara again, because they recognize that samsara itself is pervaded by suffering, and freedom must be attained from suffering. Therefore, freedom from samsara must be achieved. But what marks, so that is the same as the practitioner of intermediate capacity. But what marks the practitioner of greatest capacity out is that when they give rise to the determination to gain freedom from suffering, they then also recognize that they alone are not longing for freedom from suffering. Each and every being bound within the suffering realms of samsara also wishes to be freed of suffering. There is no being in samsara who enjoys pain and misery. All yearn for happiness, just like this practitioner also yearns for happiness. They recognize the similarity between themselves and others. And they come to the recognition that it is not acceptable that I work solely for my own welfare, for my own individual liberation, and don't put the needs of others first and foremost. How can it be acceptable that I strive for my own liberation whilst beings all around me are lost in pain and misery? I have to help them gain freedom from suffering too. But in order to do that, I have to transcend the limitations that I currently have, the limitations of being a very ordinary samsaric being. I need to become a Buddha, a being that is perfected, freed from every fault and perfectly developed all good qualities, and thereby can perfectly help each and every suffering mother sentient being in accordance with their own individual spiritual background, their own individual personalities. So therefore, I'm going to strive to develop myself in order to help others. And whilst I'm developing, every step of the way, I will be helping others as much as I can. This is the attitude of a practitioner of greatest or supreme capacity. And what marks out this capacity as supreme or greatest is the breadth of their mind. They're not just thinking about themselves, but each and every sentient being. And they're not having as a goal merely their own liberation or a good rebirth, but their goal is Buddhahood for the sake of others. This is what marks out a practitioner of greatest capacity.
Dunga se dan digi tuya dunda lega janya chik che tuyen che dizam ye samta je ma ta ma do an kewa chima hada mi ko ba thoya samata tharba da thamje ki ko ma sam gine ma ta je che di jang gi do ne samta de indi ga sa ji ma hu jor wa da andi an ke bo sum ye na ne dina de ka re lam na ta ke bo sum na ne ka ya ma re so de ke bo sum ye na ne ma re.
What distinguishes these practitioners is their goal and the accompanying breadth of attitude. Of these three practitioners, what dominates their mind is the achievement of their goal, and therefore everything they engage in is directed towards the achievement of that goal, whether it's a good rebirth or liberation or enlightenment. But the vast majority of beings don't hold those goals at the forefront of their mind. So where do they fit in amongst the beings of these three differing capacities? They are not included. They are not included because they haven't yet given rise to a sincere determination to achieve any of these goals.
규주해들와 곰지 규주해 배나주게 지 제사고 삼반에 sabinma 제답 고고로와 지단디 제답에는 디 제부도 용고로와 제부 용고로와 제사당한 저 신도 가르사기네 디 sabin마 답나 신도 기고로와 디 나신다 당아주 개와 치마 하다 미고방 하다 미고방 개와 렘발라 유가르사 고고레신 유디네데네 사고 고레세 되는 마순고래 제사 개와 치마 나솔마 개와 제 나솔라 탈제 하다 미고방 토야라 삼로칸 땅고 그래 시디 제사 삼로 데니시 땅제 소수게 삼로나로 곰시 곰바이나 개와 치마 하다 미고방 또 그래 사지 다 삼로 데니시 땅제 곰바이나 하다 미고방 토바서 마세 타르비 고방 뒤 가서 녀모바 사번에 제바 뻥배 뻥바 타르바세 토투그리 에세디 삼라당다 디시고래 다디나 다 삼로 데니시 따바이나 샘전 탐지 유던달라 랑지부 마이 샘전 탐지 코요 둥알 드제 타 산지고 고방 토투비기 토투그리 디 삼로 데니시 땅고그레 세비기 샘전 탐지 유던다 산지고 고방 토베기 탑들라 삼로 데니시 땅고그레 세비 삼로 나나디 마순고 다디나데 제사 데니자 디 림바디 마 람림세나 디레다 기부 개와치마 하다 미고와 토바 삼로 가르스 땅고그레 세디 삼로 데니시 땅고그레 세시아디 직제 다 하다 미고와 토바서 말에 띵 하다 미레 둥아 요레네 둥아 균에 매바데 타르바세 토야데 데니 삼로 가르 땅고그레세는 어디 토야라 삼로 데니시 땅고를 곰데니시 갸고레세 순고레 다나 랑지보 마이 샘전 탐지 코비 둥알을 줘야지 야 타르바토야라 샘전 탐지 둥아세 디기 주비야라 나 산지 고파세 토고 디 토야라 삼라간 땅고레는 어디 삼라딘지 땅고레세 순고 다제 람림세 삼 디숨 순고다 제사 개와치말 하다 미고바 토웨기 탑람 삼라 땅나 림바지 순고레 개와 디즈마제 안 타르베 고바 토웨기 돈달 삼라 땅나 림바지 순고레 나디네 샘자 탐주 산지 고방 토비주의 삼라당타기 림바지 송고 제서 람림 숨세디를 람이 제서 삼다타 디숨지 시고다 디나네 방아서 람림 세디 지디 냠는 지야디 소소기와치 말 하다 미고바 토바선 삼라딘 땅고래 탈바 토바 토부에나 삼라딘 땅고래 산지 고바 토바는 삼라딘 땅고래 세지 송고다
The title of the text, usually in English, we do use the Tibetan word Lamrim. So this literally means Lam means path, Rim is stages. So the title here of the text in its entirety is the graduated stages of the path of training or practice to enlightenment as practiced by the three types of beings. So what is presented here in this text is how to train one's mind or how to practice. In other words, what are the causes and how to accumulate them that will lead to these varying goals of a good rebirth, of liberation, of enlightenment. So we understand then this term to practice as about training our mind, and in this way we are accumulating the causes that will lead to the attainment of our desired goal. So the text here presents the graduated stages of the path of training one's mind. And the sequence is, firstly, that's the stages that are in accordance with the being of initial capacity. That is the foundation for all practitioners. And those who progress well there are ready to engage in the stages of training that are shared or common to the practitioner of intermediate capacity. Then those trainings which lead to liberation from samsara are built on the foundation of the initial training. And those practitioners then, who have trained well in both levels and have given rise to a sincere determination to achieve good rebirth and built on that to a sincere determination to achieve liberation, they then can successfully engage in the stages of training of the path that are unique to a practitioner of supreme capacity. So here, what I'm hoping is clear is the meaning of the word Lamrim, the stages of the path. These are divided in terms of the varying strength or way of thinking, the breadth of mind of differing practitioners, those of initial capacity, intermediate capacity, and greatest capacity.
Dini is a dang kara hawa son lamna, kibu chungu sele, samlo denis tangantile kibu chungu lagore, samlo denis tabana kibu ding lagore, chita samlo koyung ngansong dungala tarche, the tarbe samataje, manso dungala tarche, Kiawachima, Hada Migo, Tobu, some Samla Tantu and Casa de Gela, and the Toya Donala Yamlan Jirin Casa de Kibu Chung said Lagores. Cesada, this are my ember Koyu Dunga Tada, let Tarbi Tabas, Tobu, Sembig, Samla Tanje, Dondun Yerje, Di Donala, and Yamlan Jirin de la Kibu Ting said. 다 심장 탐지 고유 동안을 줘다 탈바 탐지 탈지 고유 동안을 줘 디기 띵이 되어 토베 된다라 산지 고방 토고도 세베 삼로 따제 냠는 지된 가사들 기부 침보라고 그래 세베 다 기부 중어다 딩다 침보라가디 다 되네 지를 기부 중어라고 그래 되네 삼당한테 기부 딩이라고 되네 삼당한테 기부 침보라고 그래 세디 나는 저게 하고 살아왔는데 다디디기 하고 살아요.
To summarize then the differences between the beings of the three varying capacities, what differentiates them, one can look at in terms of their goal, and corresponding to their goal is their breadth of mind. So the practitioner of initial capacity, they are determined not to fall into the lower realms and set about with vigor to accumulate the causes that will ensure a good rebirth. A practitioner of intermediate capacity, they have already trained well on that foundation, but they are now training further, recognizing that wherever one is born within samsara, one will continue to suffer. Until one attains liberation from samsara, one will remain bound within these suffering realms. So they have given rise to a determination to attain freedom from suffering. And to do this, they've had to also have this foundation of the practitioner of initial capacity. A practitioner of greatest capacity, they have also built the same foundation, but have taken it that step further. And they've recognized that their yearning for freedom from all forms of pain and misery, are shared by each and every being without exception. And that's not they don't leave that as a mere recognition. It touches them in a way that leads them to make the commitment to leave no being behind, to not abandon any mother sentient being, but place their needs first and foremost, so that they make the vow, the commitment, to lead each and every mother sentient being to a state of liberation from the sufferings of samsara. That is their commitment. And in order to fulfill that commitment, their accompanying commitment is to attain Buddhahood, so that they can become that skilled guide, and that this aspiration to lead all beings to their own liberation, that aspiration can actually be fulfilled. So those are the three goals or objectives of the beings of varying capacity.
나디 기부 친구선 기체를 주는 데나 하고 사와제. 다데네 람르나로 가르시고레스 람림 나도 빼지 람르나 가르시고레 저자 가르시고레 람나 지사 대시 기부 충우디기 개와 치마 하다 미고바 토야리아 삼로 가는 땅고레 멜 삼로 따제 간주기 삼로 따나 가르가 땅고레 데니스 땅고레세 직시고레 시고레 람림나 다데네 고외 동아 타달르제 타르바세 토발라 삼로 데니데 땅고레세 냠네린 바지 숨고레 다디 타바자마 심자 탐지게도 산제 고바 토발라 삼로 데니스 땅고레세 냠네 데니스 땅고레세 숨고레 제자다 네 람림나라야 롭센 삼로 따나 주와다 하디 소야데 가르스네 기부 충유 톱나 기부 치말 하다 미고바토나 삼로 데니스 땅고고다 세야지나 타르베 고바 톱나 삼로 데니스 땅고고레 세야나 다 산제 고바 톱나 삼로 데니스 땅고고레 세비 장도르 데니기 토베기 된다라 셈게 장도르기 림바 미다와 숨데 디시고다 람림기 제자 소야도 된다 도디레다.
So if one wonders what is taught in this thick book, all the varying topics here lay out in the sequence of first for the practices that are shared with the being of initial capacity, thereafter for intermediate capacity, and then those unique to the practitioner of supreme capacity, lays out each stage of training that an individual needs to go through in order to generate the motivation of a being of initial capacity, and thereby in dependence on having generated that, to generate the motivation of a being of intermediate capacity, and having generated that motivation, one has the foundation to continue with the trainings to generate the motivation of a being of greatest capacity. So therefore, when one receives each and every teaching here, one takes them as personal instruction, because these are the stages of training that every practitioner needs to go through, so as to spiritually develop, to spiritually transform their mind.
Korea dunga chaja tarbi goma se toyala samlatin stangore sungore yani semja tamje gyodan sanje goma toyala samlatin stangore sungore dimado chöshena ma sanji sunna chasan dagare gombulu bla soba da denegi gyagar kebe onba de panditanam gire buege lama nam yu peje karisobene disum gyodanda ko sun chebo ma do danda shenda ko sheya yomada son be me chasan dina dugo disum nani ma tuba je yomada.
Buddha Shakyamuni gave an incredible number of teachings, we can see them up there, but all of them can be summarized into what we find in this text. Because his teachings presented, for some audiences, how to achieve a good rebirth. For other audiences, building on that, he presented how to attain liberation from the sufferings of samsara in their entirety. And for other audiences, building on those two, he presented how to attain enlightenment itself, Buddhahood itself. So therefore, the entirety of Buddha's teachings are summarized in the Lamrim tradition. And then all the great commentaries that were written by the remarkable Indian Pandits such as Nagarjuna, as well as the incomparable masters from Tibet such as Lama Tsongkhapa, all of their varying texts and commentaries, they too can be subsumed into the varying trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity, and unique to a practitioner of supreme capacity.
dumde da kalya khawala baso tene sungda da tene naso yungure ma do danda ningbo de da jewo sumgi lamji timbe nyamnen di mahemba shanda ga yo ma nyamnen di nan du de bare janya le da du bi janya cha de yore.
And when one reads any other text, what is found there will be found here. What will differ is the words that are used. Perhaps the details, some texts are quite detailed in particular points, others are quite brief on other points, but the meaning is the same. What is summarized here, if one trains one's mind slowly as we move slowly through this text, one will give rise to all these qualities, all the qualities that are found within the Buddha Dharma.
Karelane nga juge kibu sumye lamji rimbe nyamne ko sumba janya re sena mateo ma khashene kibu chungye lamji rimbe ko khashe kibu dingye lam khashe kibu chembe lamji rimbe ko dinane mateo ba che me bare tene sada nga ju che kare shebene che di ko ma shen ma da shanda she me da.
And whichever teaching you attend on the Buddha Dharma, whatever that teaching is on, can be included here within the range of the three scopes of practitioners. Nothing is omitted in this text or in this class of teachings, of these Lamrim texts.
Barshim Mayoya, the Pinama Chatsavana, Sunam Bottom Pasaya, then Sunam Sabe, Sunam D. Dubian, Zombala Barche Shiva, Zomba Tarshimoya, Dandala, Namboda, Lama, Kibutambanamji, and the Chick Che Sonya Kadi, Chiven Nambo Chasawa Yungore.
Lama Tsongkhapa commences his text, as with all other Buddhist texts. It starts with a homage or salutation, or homage rather. The purpose of a homage is, by the author, is to accumulate merit, and that merit is accumulating so as to eradicate obstacles to the successful composition of his text and for the goals and aspirations of the text to be achieved. So now we turn on the third page, right at the top. Respectfully, I prostrate at the feet of those venerable holy beings filled with compassion.
지산다 제주엘의 제람나 저 추기 개보 추스는데 다 조르 지산다 준바세의 개준 상품 연대의 대바대 라미기 야 안에 상기 랑게 라마다 상기 오 열매 삼다제 될이야 연대조 제준자 제 추기 개보 종화 안 추기 개보제 안 개준 상품 연대의 대바 담바스의 초도 규바 안디나네 대개준 상품 대바 망보 여러봐 디나네 초도 규바세 초도 규바 안 투지 첨보의 덴바세도 배 투세와 첨비게 안지게 투지 대안의 제와 첨보 탈 첨보서 첨보를 투지 첨보 투지라는 투세와세 첨보를 되네 탈 첨보서도 되네게 다 상계다 제는 랑게 라마 제준 개준 상수미 상계 용어 예면 케메비게 안에 게디나 제외 단위지 현리아 현기 동화세 디기 좀라 제와 냐냐 도시네 된되긴 되네게 된비게 라마 남라 나만의 샵로 그배 차살로스 되네게 라마들이야 차사기 예수거라 두제 세상 아주 잠 니제들 두제래 거라 첨보라데 다 첨바서 첨보 상 얘기 야 잠니제들 고고래 세상 두제에서도 두제와 첨보서 거라 세상 두제와 첨보라도 첨보 두제와는 니제 호라지 첨보라도 딜레 캬바 연된 첨보서 거라 세상 상 얘기 유기 두제 제와서 세상 상 얘기 연된 데시고 세상 랑게 제선 라마 안에 초도 기로바 안에 두제와 첨보 탈신배 제와 첨보의 덴베게 덴바 되네게 라마 남라 아니 남시들 제르메체 라마 망보여로와 되네게 라마 남라 셰블 구베 차살로서 나데 라마다네 산중오 예메스무시.
So looking at the homage, respectfully I prostrate at the feet of those venerable holy beings filled with compassion. So here, venerable holy beings, this then refers to Lama Tsongkhapa's many lamas, his own spiritual teachers, and who he is venerating here as recognizing that they are indivisible from the Buddhas. He doesn't distinguish between the Buddhas and his lamas, but recognizing that in the continuum they are indivisible. Indivisible. And then furthermore, the term compassion. So the word is the honorific word for compassion, but the way it's written, we should understand that this is compassion that has been developed to the level of perfection, which means it's a compassion in the continuum of a Buddha. So that adds to the understanding of venerable holy beings, meaning his lamas that he's seeing as indivisible from the Buddhas, and here their compassion is the compassion of Buddhas. In other words, it's been developed to the level of perfection. And he's offering prostration or homage to them, recognizing that everything they do is directed solely at benefiting all mother sentient beings. So therefore, inspired by their example, he begins his text by offering homage to them.
나디네 야 추셔다 좀 봐라 담자와질라 아직들 들어와 미지신기 원추 좀된 뒤에서 예비 개삽 점군 추기체 대시의 군기 엽직 전배 양 예비로된 루룹 토메라 그베 뒤에 삼보타와 당 예친 주베 남기 림발라 대라니도 주시를 라자니 너유 추기 뒤에 셰버자사.
Continuing in the text, Blessed One, Lord of this endurance world, Buddha's regent, Maitreya, Lord of the Dharma, Manjughosha, sole father of those gone to bliss, Nagarjuna and Asanga, foretold by the victor, Bowing to you with respect, I will here explain once more in a summary fashion the stages of the path of profound view and vast conduct for the sake of making them easy to access.
당부 쳐봐 쳐봐지래 미지 신기 왕주 점된 뒤에서 상유 점된 데를 쳐봐 쳐봐리디.
The first line, Blessed One, Lord of this endurance world. This is a homage to the Blessed One or the Bhagavan, to Buddha Shakyamuni.
다데네 미지 신랍나 저기 점링 데라서 그래 미지 신이라고 그래. 미지 신이라나 미지엘한테 서버 검토해야지. 서버 검토해야 돼서 그거래. 그래서네 저기 점리 미된 데라 미 개월렘베 된 데라 묘모바 코 독숨되게 파 지파 델이야 쇠제 냠는지 투어와 진짜 미지신이라고 하죠. 점링이 신들 미지신. 그래서네 근데 강송에 때라 강송으로 때 강송하다 냐와다 이다 둔족이 된 데라 가려서네 독숨되게 파 쇠제 디파가 델이야 님보된 냠는지 투어 말와 당한지게 점링 비기다 디신 델이야 된 델이야 아니 묘모베 님보된 제파 가제 안 쇠투고리 매바 쇠투야게 쇠투고 맞아 미지신스요래 미지신스 미기 말 미지엘나 쇠보 공부하세요 쇠투바라고 그래 제장아 저기 점링 비디라 묘모 두숨을 파 쇠지 강아치면 강아디도 쇠제 될 님보된제 냠는지 투고요 맞아 미지신스래.
Explain this unusual expression, that of endurance world. So this refers to our world, the world that we abide in, the world that we dwell in. So this is a world where we do endure suffering. In particular, it refers to the suffering of the afflictions that we have to endure. But it's not merely that we have to endure these afflictions. We have the capacity to apply antidotes to these afflictions, and thereby can actually practice patience with this suffering that we currently have to endure. In other words, we can successfully apply antidotes to the afflictions, our mental suffering that we have to endure. This isn't the case for all beings. Those, for example, in the lower realms, their suffering is far too intense and their capacity far too limited to be able to apply antidotes. Whereas for us in this world of endurance, we can apply antidotes to our mental suffering.
당하지게 점블링이 될라 신이 될라 미제 신세 오르다 점블링 배신이 될 점블링 세야 될 미제 신이라고 오르다다 나도 점블링 세야 돼. 신 달라 왕축라도 다 나저기 미지 신 점블링 당라야 지게 탈베 람된칸 망고여 와다 디나데 쪼디레 해서 쪼레 왕축라도 쪼라고 그래 쪼 나상이 좀 된대서 쪼레서 제가 결혼 쪼레서 ben에 대등하지 가르선 기부 숨게 남기린 배 냠는 땡ken기 초도 교바 쪼레서지 결혼 쪼레서지 왕축서.
Then the particular word, so first of all, endurance world, this is a less common way to express the name of our own world. So we know from the mandala offering earlier tonight, Zambuling, this is a more common way to refer to this, the world that we live in. But this endurance world is a less common way to refer to our world. Then the other term, that of Lord. So there are different words for Lord. This particular word that's here translated as Lord refers to Buddha Shakyamuni as being the supreme amongst spiritual teachers. So there are many teachers who teach a path to liberation, but amongst them, Buddha Shakyamuni is supreme. So that is the particular meaning of this word for Lord.
왕축세 쪼세요. 내가 왕축세디 ben에 탑라 연된 풍선 초바다 풍선 초바세지 고두거를 풍선 초바 연된 풍선 초바 때 타바다 탐지 김별 람 드버지별 람 냠는 림파 다 용서 초바 마차와면 풍선 초바다 템바스 왕축세.
Because it's only Buddha Shakyamuni who teaches the complete and unmistaken path to attain this liberation from samsara. So therefore, he is seen as being Lord amongst spiritual teachers, or the ruler of spiritual teachers.
다 좀된 세도 좀 라도 다 상여 좀된 결혼 녀모 두숨 사번 바샤된 제바 빵바리 좀 바리 매바서 사바레스 진짜 빵바리 해야지 좀 되니게 빵비 연된지 결혼을 두셔야지 좀된 아니 최담제 아니 지게 람드면 냠랭이 짐바 또베 이些아니 대한 된바리 세대지 왕추셔야지 왕추세를 된다 인식상 왕추세도 做确定的람이做的是직제 직라 아니 되니게 람이 짐바 냠랭이 짐바 용수做바 푼수 做바 된바리라요도 제가 람이 연데 푼수 做바야 결혼을 된도 녀모바 사번 바샤데 제바 빵배 연데 결혼을 된샤 세대 된바리샤 세대 된샤 제 람유레다 지네.
Then the word we have here is Blessed One, which is the English. The Sanskrit you'll be familiar with, Bhagavan. And also from some of the prayers, the Tibetan, Chomdende. So looking at then the meaning of the Tibetan, Chomdende, the first syllable, that of Chom, this refers to having destroyed or cut or overcome, destroyed or overcome, triumphed over the afflictions together with the seeds. So this is one quality of Buddhas, of a Bhagavan, is that they have completely eradicated the afflictions together with his seeds and imprints. Then the second syllable, Chom Den, so the Den, this is to have or to possess. So this refers to all good qualities. So a Bhagavan or a Buddha possesses all good qualities, and not just merely possesses them, but has developed them to the state of perfection. So the first syllable, that of Chom, is to have eradicated completely all afflictions together with their seeds and imprints, so not a trace of fault is left. And then the second syllable, Den, is all good qualities have been developed to the level of perfection.
gyön namjile dezi gyön namjile chowares chowanzada larya gyön yongya yomares 제가 연된 게디나 연된 장자레스 제가다 좀된디 세디에서 gyön namjile 대바레스 다 gyön gy네요 말레스 제가 연된 장자레스 사실 그거로.
The Tibetan word again for Bhagavan or Blessed One is Chom Den De, so spoken on Chom and Den. Now the third syllable De, this is to have transcended, to have gone beyond. So what this refers to is that all faults have been transcended. One has gone beyond all faults, which means they will never ever arise again. And this is because with that first syllable, the afflictions together with his seeds and imprints have been destroyed. And because one has transcended all faults, one abides in a state only possessing qualities, which was, the qualities was referred to in the second syllable, that of Den. So this is now the meaning of the third syllable of De, of having transcended or gone beyond all faults and abiding in a state of lasting qualities.
gyön tamje nyomo dusun basanan jeba bangbe기 bangbe 연대의 된바 최 tamje 용순 두베 탈시비 연대의 된바 연대 결혼 연대 되니도 제 상유 좀내의 연대 되니도 결혼 안에 안쪽에 지딘지 미세 지딘에 감될이야 지 탈바다 탐제 김비고 람 땡킹이 땡킹도 조 결혼에 자와 조 결혼에 되는자 야 결혼이야 아니 상유 좀내들이야 차세기 그래서 쳐봐 주기 위해서 그러다 제가다 쳐봐 줘야 돼 구성 투숨이 연된 바딘데 결혼 연된 되니도 연된 죄제 네고 제바들란 쳐봐 그러와 쳐봐.
What we're looking at here in the first 5 lines. Now, well, the very first line, which we've covered, was the homage. Now, in the first 5 lines is the salutation. So what we're seeing in the very first line, Blessed One, Lord of this endurance world, is the first line of the 5 lines of salutation, where the Bhagavan is being praised for having completely abandoned all faults, in other words, the afflictions, together their seeds and imprints, eradicated them completely, and possessing all good qualities and having developed them to the state of perfection. And not only being praised for what has been attained, but being praised for being the illuminator of the path for ordinary beings such as ourselves who populate this world of endurance. So being the faultless guide for beings such as ourselves. So here his qualities are, as this faultless guide, are praised.
Alright, that is Yashana Digudo. I didn't answer Garechik Jiresine Kivu Sum said the kind of share said the Hakoya Chita, that Lamrim na Sanyi Sun Shev Sanyi no Sundana, Geshe Garit Sem Juata, Tablam can she go to city, then Kivu Chumugi, and the Tablam Giwachima Hada Mugo Watoga, Tablam Samatana, and Tarbatoyagi, or Toyag Dandala Samatana, Sanyi Gowatoyag, Tabat Samtana. Di samlo juwatana di ma sunggo re said that's all in body has the dire that is what it how not to do chen shu sare then din ma sanyi ma mu de shu.
So our time is up for tonight already. So just to summarize very briefly what we looked at is in the full title in the Tibetan, we looked at the explanation of what the 3 types of beings are and how they are differentiated in terms of their goal and the broadness of their attitude. And we looked at the subject matter of this text, which is the varying trainings that are built on. The trainings of a practitioner of initial capacity is striving for a good rebirth. The practices of a being of intermediate capacity, which are built on that basis, who are striving for liberation. And then thirdly, built on both of those, the practices of a being of greatest capacity, who is striving for enlightenment for the sake of all beings. So that is the bulk of what we looked at tonight. And then tomorrow we'll continue looking at the salutation. Okay. And thank you very much. Thank you.